Before becoming the 27th President of the United States, William Howard Taft served as the United States Secretary of War under his predecessor, Theodore Roosevelt, as well as serving as the Governor General of the Philippines and the Provisional Governor of Cuba. A lawyer and one-time Solicitor General of the United States, and later Chief Justice, Taft broke with Roosevelt's charismatic politicking in favor of a staunch adherence to the rule of law during his presidential administration. While decisive and level-headed in his decision-making, Taft won the favor of few fellow politicians, journalists, or his constituents after failing to recognize any political ramifications of his decisions. While he considered himself a progressive, Taft, as a lawyer, was a slave to precedent, denying himself the flexibility and adroitness of Roosevelt. As Taft continued to make decisions that broke with his party's line, the 1912 presidential election saw Taft challenged by his predecessor, and the man to whom Taft had been unfavorably compared his whole presidency, Teddy Roosevelt. They vied for the Republican nomination for president in 1912, and Taft narrowly won the re-election spot. It was all for naught, however, for the Democrat Woodrow Wilson would go on to become the next president of the United States.
I always remember that America was established not to create wealth, though any nation must create wealth which is going to make an economic foundation for its life, but to realize a vision, to realize an ideal. America has put itself under bonds to the earth to discover and maintain liberty, now among men. And if she cannot see liberty now with the clear, unerring vision she had at the outset, she has lost her title. She has lost her claim to the leadership and respect of the nations of the world.
The 28th president and second sitting president to secure the Nobel Peace Prize, Woodrow Wilson, was inaugurated President of the United States on March 4, 1913. A leader of the progressive movement, Wilson led an unparalleled legislative agenda, including the passage of the Federal Reserve Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, the Federal Farm Loan Act, and the establishment of an income tax. The Adamson Act also passed, finally establishing an 8-hour workday for railroad construction laborers. Initially unsupportive of women's suffrage, Wilson bowed to public sentiment and soon advocated the woman's right to vote. When World War I raged in Europe, Wilson's foreign policy kept us out of war, and the president was narrowly elected for a second term in 1916 on that platform, although unrestricted German submarine warfare forced the United States to enter the war the following year, with Congress declaring war on Germany. After the war, Wilson helped to draft the Treaty of Versailles and created the League of Nations, for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize. But both the treaty and the League were dismissed by Congress and Wilson's Republican rivals as negligent to the rights of the United States when it came to the possible outbreak of another global war. The work which won Wilson the Peace Prize wound up becoming his political undoing. In a landslide election in 1920, the Republicans retook control of Congress and the White House.
The world needs to be reminded that all human ills are not curable by legislation, and that quantity of statutory enactment and excess of government offer no substitute for quality of citizenship. The problems of maintained civilization are not to be solved by a transfer of responsibility from citizenship to government, and no eminent page in history was ever drafted by the standards of mediocrity. More, no government is worthy of the name which is directed by influence on the one hand, or moved by intimidation on the other.
29th President Warren G. Harding promised a return to normalcy, or a return to life as it was before World War I in his campaign for President of the United States. While Harding worked as an advocate for labor, minorities, and women, he has the dubious distinction of being involved in one of the first major political scandals and established a new normalcy of corruption and cronyism in politics. When elected, Harding selected the so-called best minds for his cabinet, but rewarded his campaign contributors and friends with powerful positions. Known as the Ohio Gang, this group orchestrated the infamous Teapot Dome scandal, whereby Harding's Secretary of the Interior, Albert B. Fall, was convicted of accepting bribes from private oil companies in a deal that leased Navy oil reserves to private companies at seemingly low rates and without any bidding from other companies. While corruption came to taint Harding's legacy, Harding died suddenly on August 2, 1923, cutting his one term short. Speculation abounded. One theory, that Harding's own wife poisoned him due to the rumored affairs with other women that Harding was known for. Mrs. Harding refused an autopsy, but doctors at the time theorized that the symptoms pointed to congestive heart failure. Harding's widow, Florence, quickly returned to Washington to burn or hide away Harding's papers and personal correspondence in an effort to protect his legacy. However, the corruption and scandal that was exposed after his death has ranked Harding among the worst American presidents. Succeeding the fallen president, Calvin Coolidge was sworn in as the 30th President of the United States on August 2, 1923. His tenure as governor of Massachusetts established Coolidge in the American consciousness as a man of decisive action. His term in office saw the United States align with his own views. Coolidge favored small government, and under his administration, the economy grew rapidly. Commerce expanded. The national debt was reduced. The budget was in surplus. Taxes were lowered significantly, and the federal government shrank both in absolute terms as well as relative to state governments and the growing private sector. When securing the Republican nomination for what would be his first full-term elected president in his own right, Coolidge stated,
"I believe in the American Constitution. I favor the American system of individual enterprise, and I am opposed to any general extension of government ownership and control. I believe not only in advocating economy and public expenditure, but in its practical application and actual accomplishment. I believe in a reduction and a reform of taxation, and shall continue my efforts in that direction."
Coolidge had his work cut out for him in terms of restoring faith in the presidency, especially after the scandal that marred his predecessor's administration and legacy. He managed to enjoy considerable popularity during his term, and the economic expansion and laissez-faire government policies won him favor with both his fellow party members and voters. Though his party urged him to run for a third term in 1928, Coolidge declined, stating,
"The chances of having a wise and faithful public service are increased by a change in the presidential office after a moderate length of time."
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.